Come take a journey with Education Matters as local historian Mr. Wayne O'Brien shares with us the history of Black History Month and so much more. His stories will captivate you right now on Education Matters. Welcome inside of Education Matters. My name is Donna Moore Westby, your host of Education Matters, and we're connecting you to the world of education one step at a time. We sure hope you enjoyed the rebroadcast of the previous segment of Education Matters, where we talked about the South Carolina Tuition Grants Program. And we'd also like to send our prayers to the family and friends of Officer Sandy Rogers. Our community is still in deep prayer and deep thought for the family and friends, also of Officer Scotty Richardson, as well as for the entire community and all who've been impacted by these shootings. So definitely want to thank you for tuning in today to a new broadcast. I am so thrilled to have Mr. Wayne O'Brien with me today. You're definitely going to want to get your paper and your pen out and take some notes. I believe you'll be spellbound with the stories he has to share with us today. All right? But first, we'd like to thank the sponsors of Education Matters, and they are Bryant Insurance Agency out of Aiken, South Carolina, Magnolia Medical Center, Dr. Margot Muniz, and she has recently opened up a new office in the Barnwell area. So we look forward to telling you more about that office as well. Westby's Products and Services, creator of Dawn Seasoning Delight, all-purpose seasoning and marinade, and also the Barner Group, Educational Associates, providing after-school tutoring and a plethora of other educational services. The Martial Arts Academy, under the direction of Mr. Andrew Blocker. He has a wonderful program for youth entitled Taekwondo to Excel, teaching children discipline and, quite frankly, saving a lot of families. And then finally, Will Lou Gray Opportunity School out of West Columbia. Also a fantastic option for our families, for those children who may have a difficult time in the traditional school setting. Maybe they also need some discipline. You're going to want to give the Will Lou Gray Opportunity School a try. Okay, thanks to all of you for supporting Education Matters, and we're certainly looking for more sponsors, so hopefully you will be so inclined to help us out, all right? Just one reminder for today. I don't know if you remember, but I also broadcast a radio program, and it is also called Education Matters, and it is broadcast every Wednesday morning from 10 to 11 a.m. on Shout 94.7 FM. The call letters are WAAW, and that program is live on Wednesday mornings from 10 to 11, and then the rebroadcast also airs on Saturday evenings from 6 to 7 p.m. All right? We sure hope you will take time to listen to the broadcast. They are two totally different segments from this broadcast. Sometimes we'll have the same guests, but a wonderful opportunity again to share information with you. All right? So please tune in to Education Matters on 94.7 FM. All right. It's now time for the Education Matters tip of the week. Every week we do provide you with a brand new tip, and here is this week's. Every week, set a day to review the Education Matters website for updated information. Yes, we're being a little selfish here today, but I need for you to know edmat.com has a wealth of information for you. Right now, we have articles there as it pertains to finances and budgeting. from my financial correspondent, Miss Sandra Bland. So you'll find articles there, Money Matters with Sandra. I'm always updating the website every week to place articles pertaining to the topics of the week, whether it's on the radio broadcast as well as the television broadcast. You'll also find study tips. You'll also find step-by-step guide on helping your children go to college, starting from the 8th grade all the way through the 12th grade. Just a great deal of information, including websites that also pertain to education. So make sure you check out www.edmat.com. Now also, another little tip there is even if you have not seen all of the broadcasts, the television broadcasts for Education Matters, all of them are archived on my website. So if you are a youth group leader, all you have to do, this is just an idea, pull that youth group together in a room, pull up my broadcast on the internet, and you can have your workshop right there within your church, even in your own home. Disseminating information that will be very helpful for you and the community. So that's our tip of the week, all right? That wonderful sound means, yes, as Miss Cindy smiles, it's Word of the Week time inside of Education Matters. This Word of the Week, I know you have heard it a million times. If you watch the news, if you've ever heard President Obama speak, you're going to hear this word, I guarantee, at least 5 times. And this Word of the Week is notion. Notion, all right? Notion. And notion is a noun. Has several meanings. A general impression or feeling. It also means a view, conception, or theory, or intention or inclination. And I believe I'll use definition number 1 in my sentence. Dr. King believed in the notion that men should be judged on the content of their character, not the color of their skin. All right, I certainly believe in that notion, and I second that emotion. All right, that is this week's Tip of the Week and Word of the Week. Again, if you've missed previous Tips of the Week or Word of the Week, just go to that website, edmat.com, and you'll find them all there. All right? Well, after a few words from our sponsors, we'll introduce you to a phenomenal man. I just love to hear him and hear the stories of not just Black history, but South Carolina history. All right, we'll be right back.
Does your child or grandchild need help in reading or math, or can benefit from preparatory coursework for the HSAP, ACT, or SAT? If so, contact the Barner Group Educational Associates. Our staff specializes in formatting an individualized approach to assisting your child academically. We offer low-cost tutorial services and educational programs. Participants may qualify for free services. To learn more, call for Alicia Cuthbertson of the Barner Group Educational Associates, 1-888-TBG-3996.
Tired of hearing automated answering services when you have questions about auto, home, renters, motorcycle, or life insurance? Call the Bryant Insurance Agency, where you will always receive a representative ready to answer your questions and provide friendly customer service just for you. Call today for a quick quote at 803-642-8505 or visit us at 909 Daughtery Road in Aiken. Takia and her staff are ready to serve you.
The Will Gray Opportunity School has been serving the beautiful Midlands of South Carolina since 1921. Our mission has evolved over the years, and we now specialize in helping young people move past their obstacles in order to achieve success. We give students opportunities to lead, to develop social skills, to become active in their communities, and to taste success. Don't settle for less than the absolute best for your life. Contact us today to take the next step in your journey toward success.
I lead a busy life, but I still have to make sure my family eats right. And everybody loves Dawn's Seasoning Delight. I use Dawn's on meats and vegetables. It's healthy, tastes great, and it's simple to use. It's like having a chef in a bottle.
My seasoning is available at Kroger, Bilo, Food Line, Roots, and Harvest. Look for it on display in the meat department. Also visit seasoningdelight.com for information and recipes. Don's Seasoning Delight. It's so good.
Welcome back inside of Education Matters. Thanks so much for joining us. Today, inside of Education Matters, we have with us Mr. Wayne O'Brien, a local historian who is doing wonderful things in our area as it relates to education. And today he's going to share with us the history behind Black History Month, in addition to his own experience growing up in the historical Charleston, South Carolina. So, Mr. O'Brien, welcome to Education Matters.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, Mr. O'Brien was my guest on last week's radio broadcast and did such a wonderful job. We thought it would be great to have him on the television broadcast as well. So why don't we start off by introducing you to our viewers. Who is Wayne O'Brien?
Well, Wayne O'Brien is a regular guy.
Okay.
I was born in Charleston, South Carolina. Like I said,
It's the little accent there.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
the Gullah Geechee Low
Right.
Country. But yeah, Charleston is probably the most historic city in the United States. You know, it held its history well. I was raised in the 1960s, born in 1960, and grew up during the middle of the Civil Rights Movement.
Okay.
But I had a great-grandmother who was the daughter of emancipated slaves, who was born in 1895. She lived right across the street from me.
Wow.
And she retired as a school principal. She was, you know, graduated from Allen University in 1912 and was a school principal from the 20s to the 60s. And she retired just in time, you know, for me to be born. And you know, it happened out that way. But she started to take care of me during the day while my mother was working.
Okay.
And she decided she was going to start teaching me about history when I was about 3 years old.
Do
And
you
so
have a picture of her with you?
I do.
Yeah.
This particular picture is of my great-grandmother and my great-grandfather with my grandmother and her siblings. And this was in 1928. So at this point, she was already a school principal.
Wow.
But she began to take me around the city of Charleston to sites where you know, slave auctions had taken place and hangings and things like that. She said that I needed to learn about my history because when I entered school, it would not be found in history books. So that's where the root of the love for history took place.
Okay, and I must say I admire you for that. I struggled, quite frankly, in school with history. For some reason, I never could just retain the dates and names. Now, in terms of concepts and theory, I got that, but I never could just retain the dates and names and the historical specific events. How were you able to grasp the appreciation of that knowledge that you were getting from your grandmother at such an early age?
Well, I found out later. I believe I was born for it. I believe I was born at the time that I was born and into the family and into the city for this. But it really had to do with the love and respect I have for my great-grandmother.
Yes.
You know, I was 3, she was 65 at the time. We would take walks together. And because I revered her so much, I hung on to her every word. And even at the age of 3, I was still thinking that this is a lot to lay on a little kid. You know, when I went to kindergarten, the hanging tree was outside of my window. And when other children were coloring in coloring books, I was out there imagining the amount of people that died on that tree. So she put things in me, but I loved her so much I hung on to it.
Yeah.
And actually when I began to write was after she passed away. That all the stories started to flood back, and you know, I realized she didn't give them to me to keep, she gave them to me to share.
One of the thoughts that has always played in my mind is how can one, a black person who grew up in the area you grew up during the time of civil rights, and then certainly sitting, listening to the stories, some of the horrible stories shared by your great-grandmother, how are you able to then love and have an open desire for others when there was so much hatred and so much oppression during the time you grew up?
Like I said, I really believe I was born for this. I was born on a block in Charleston, and the block was like it's almost integrated and segregated. It was half white and half black, but there was a black side that started at our house and went all the way to the corner. The neighbor on the other side was white, and it was white all the way to the corner. And right across the street, that same dividing line was at my grandparents' house. It was black from their house to one side of the street and white all the way to the other side. So we grew up on this block, with children of different races, and we all were friends, and we played together, and we thought of each other as brothers in a way.
Right.
So I really never understood racism because I had friends when Roots came out and we were young, but we had these friends that had been like brothers to us all along, so we understood that there really wasn't a difference. When we left our block, we would start to experience some racism, but when we came back to our block, we didn't. So we kind of understood how to judge people based on the individual and not a whole general race of people.
Okay, all right. Now, in talking about Black history, there are those who feel as if we should not even have that distinction of Black history. It's American history. It's just a part of the chronology of what has taken place in this country. As a historian, what is your thought on the founding of Black History Month and the significance of it, and why we should still carry on with that celebration today?
Okay, well, the necessity for it was what my great-grandmother taught me when I was little. She said, I'm going to have to teach you because when you enter school, you won't find it in the history books. It's not there. And so when you have a group of people that's going to decide what's going to go into a history book, they can come across Black history, Native American history, European history, but they choose what they're going to put into the book. And then students, Black students, Native American students will all read this history that they chose. And if they have 90% European history in there and then 10%, and even the 10% of Black history that they chose to put in, they put in something that a picture they wanted to paint. Never about what were they before they were captured and enslaved. What kind of culture was on that particular continent. What contributions did they contribute even during slavery. When I started to research, I found all these things that weren't in the history books. And so even though Carter G. Woodson, the historian, started Black Negro History Week during the 1926, is because of the lack of history and Black history in the textbooks. So he thought that he had to find some way of teaching it separate. And so that was the start. We have started to include some African American history, but the story is still very much undertold. How the United States began, George Washington's army was a quarter Black. During the American Revolution, they helped to actually start the country. And they needed them in order to begin the country, and they also needed them in order to save the country during the Civil War. But the stories are so undertold that we don't know the contribution that African Americans made.
And why is that? Why do you believe? Now, I have my own opinion about that, which to me it goes back to fear and ignorance. But as a historian, why do you believe people in those days, and maybe to some degree even today, find the need to oppress or to keep some information hidden?
Well, all right, there's a thing we know about called white supremacy, which is a myth, but this is something I have to answer these questions from time to time. I have friends that consider themselves rednecks, but even though they're rednecks and we get to converse with one another, they come to understand me and I come to understand them. There was a term that people use, go back to Africa. And I would always say, well, let's assume we were going to go back to Africa. We came here, we built the country, we blood and sweat and tears. It's every bit as much ours as it is yours. But let's just say we went back. What do you think would happen? I say either y'all would come back behind us, to do the work that you didn't want to do in the first place. That's why you came and got us. Or you would turn on each other. People have this, it's a flaw, it's a character flaw in humans, to find differences and oppress one another. And the North and the South, even though they were white Northerners and white Southerners, they still call them Yankees today. Some Southerners still don't like Northerners, and they're all white.
That's true.
And even in the state of Georgia and South Carolina, they identify with each other as being a fellow Southern state. But if you come to the southern region, then they have problems with Georgia right across the border. We live right on the river. So you find these differences that Georgians and South Carolinas have, whether they're white or black. In the South Carolina state, everybody in the state of South Carolina is South Carolinians, but the northern part of the state actually has a lot of differences with the people in the low country. And so they always find these differences no matter what. If we left, I said, y'all would find some reason to look at each other and say, well, since you have brown hair and I have blonde hair, then one would try to find a way to oppress the other.
Yeah.
There's this need to feel superior to another group.
And what it ends up being is counterproductive to us as a society, as a country, as a world, being progressive and moving forward. And I said this in one of my columns that, you know, God definitely has a sense of humor, but he has a serious side too. And I wonder why he made us different. And I shared this with you last week, that I really believe it's to see if we can get along right here on earth and not focus on those differences, but coming together. How can we love one another? How can we help one another and uplift one another? Because certainly we don't need to mess up heaven with all this junk that we're carrying on with right now.
You might not be able to get there.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's take it back. Because in order for us to understand, as you so eloquently stated, the necessity of Black History Month, we really need to take it back to the days of slavery, the resilience that those individuals possessed, to help us then make the connection as to why we need to preserve that history. We have a graphic of a slave ship diagram that we want to show you. And as we're showing you this photo, and then we're going to also show you a clip, Mr. O'Brien here is going to share with us some history.
Okay, this is a packing diagram that the ship captains would try to figure out how to put the most slaves onto a ship, because each person represented a dollar value. And so they wanted to show you how to pack as many on as you could, because that would be that much more valuable cargo. But as you notice, they're shoulder to shoulder, they're tightly packed. The voyage might take 3 months, and so that, you know, they may be lying in their own waste, you know, and but about a third of them would die on the way over. This is actually a packing diagram at the state capitol. There's the only African American monument in any state capitol in the United States is in Columbia, South Carolina. And, you know, South Carolina being the first state to secede from the Union, Civil War started there and everything, this was a big accomplishment to get an African American monument out there. But it's a slave ship diagram. And like I said, about a third of the slaves would die on the voyage over and be thrown overboard, and to, you know, the sharks would feed on them. But it shows that only the strong made it through the voyage, and those are the genes that were passed on. So those genes of these strong individuals allowed their descendants to be able to survive the hardships of slavery.
In one of your videos, you talked about the Middle Passage.
Right.
Give us a little bit more detail about the actual voyage and where, because people also have a misunderstanding of where the Africans were actually picked up in Africa and then brought over to the country.
Okay.
So give us a history lesson.
Okay, the African Americans are descended from West Africans. West Africa is closer to the east coast of the United States and in the Americas, so that would have been the logical thing, the darker ship on the West African coast and take as many captives as you could. The Middle Passage is the Atlantic Ocean, basically. The distance between where they took the slaves and where they brought the slaves. But it would take 3 months, seasickness, on the bottom of a ship during the summer months. It may be 100 degrees. And like I said, there are babies being born under there are people dying under there's disease spreading. And so just to survive that, it took, and when you even think about the mental, if you were captured, if you were lucky enough to be captured with your family, you may not arrive intact. Somebody may die on the way over. So sometimes you were separated from your family on the continent because somebody got snatched, or you were separated because somebody died on the way over. And then when you got to the United States, you could also be separated on the auction block. If a master wants to buy a child but doesn't want the parents, they could just take that child from. So you had all these different things, these mental things that were going. So they had this post-traumatic stress disorder, but you still had to survive and maintain. All these things actually were passed on as strengths in the genes. And so it really prepared them for what they were going to face, because they had to have this resilience to sustain this over generations, really.
Right.
And there was always this hope that the next generation will be free, or the next generation will be free.
So in essence, Charleston became, I don't know if the right word is the genesis of where slaves were brought and actually separated from their families. So that's why there's so much history and ancestral connection in that town.
Yeah, when you look at, of course, we know Jamestown was the original colony, but it didn't last very long. And then you had the Pilgrims up in Massachusetts. But the North had actually abolished slavery after the American Revolution, because so many African Americans fought in the Revolution. That's why they abolished slavery in the North. Charleston was founded in 1670. Immediately, it was a slave colony, and it became the most important slave port in the United States. And so there's an island called Sullivan's Island in Charleston, which is called the Ellis Island of the Slaves, or it's known as it, but it predates Ellis Island. But Charleston, we call it the ground zero down there in Charleston. About 80% of African Americans can probably trace one ancestor to one of the ports in Charleston. So yeah, Charleston, and it held its history. There are a number of buildings down there are 300 years old. The cobblestone streets in Charleston were stones that were in the bottom of the slave ships. As ballast, they took them off of the ships and paved the roads with them. So when you walk those streets, you're walking on stones that some of your ancestors actually laid on and bled on. So walking through that city with my great-grandmother, and they're talking about it, you're visualizing, you're hearing the sounds.
Yes.
So you're almost reliving, you're going back a few hundred years and reliving some of those experiences.
And I would imagine that the importance of reliving those types of experiences would then maybe help to instill a sense of value and importance and significance in our people, so that we can understand that we come from a people of resilience, of people who had to fight through. And so when we make it relevant to today's time, and we look at what's going on in our country today with crime, education, families breaking up, certainly some of those things go back to what happened early on, which is a huge reason why we need to preserve our history. After a few words from our sponsor, we'll continue our discussion with Mr. Wayne O'Brien. We'll talk about the purpose of Black History Month a little bit more, and actually see, does it have the same meaning today as it did when it was first instituted? We'll be right back.
Total Women's Healthcare means treating the women physically, emotionally, and everything in between. At Magnolia Medical Women's Center, we treat and diagnose common and unusual medical problems related to female health. Magnolia Medical Center is a premium high-level obstetrics and gynecology clinic for women of all ages. Our clients receive the time they deserve without feeling rushed and unimportant. We are located in the Aiken Medical Center, 410 University Parkway in Aiken, Suite 2300. Call us today at 803-649-6366.
When it comes to grilling, I'm the man. Using Dawn Seasoning Delight, I'm the grill master.
My seasoning is available at Kroger, Buy Low, Food Line, Reeds, and Harvest. Look for it on display in the meat department. Also visit seasoningdelight.com for information and recipes. Dawn Seasoning Delight. It's so good.
Dawn Seasoning Delight is so good.
Everybody knows that February 14th is the day for lovers. Yes, Valentine's Day. But do we all know how to make love last? Next time on Education Matters, Education Matters Family Life contributor, Mr. Roger Rollins, shares with us tips as we discuss making love last inside of Education Matters, right here with me, Donna Moore Westby, on ASTV Channel 95.
Need positive and constructive after-school activities for your children? Call the Martial Arts Academy in Aiken under the direction of International Olympic trainer Andrew Blocker. The Martial Arts Academy offers an award-winning approach to teaching Taekwondo. It's an effective approach to instilling discipline. The Martial Arts Academy also offers self-defense and fitness classes for all ages. Enroll today in this affordable program by calling 803-642-5723 or visit the studio at 2398 Whiskey Road in Aiken. The Martial Arts Academy, positively changing the lives of youth and adults.
If you are interested in becoming an individual or corporate sponsor of Education Matters or to receive sponsorship information, call Donna Moore Westby at 803-507-6793 or send an email to dwesby@edmath.com.
Welcome back inside of the broadcast. If you're just tuning in today, we have with us in the studio Mr. Wayne O'Brien, who is a local historian, and he makes a point of not just talking about Black history, but American history and also South Carolina history. So we're happy to have him here today. If you have a comment or would like to pose a question to us, feel free to send me a text on 803-507-6793. Again, that's if you have a question or a comment during today's broadcast. All right, Mr. Bryant, let's go back to the whole genesis of Black History Month.
Okay.
The actual name was Negro History?
Negro History Week.
Okay, tell us about that.
Well, it was, like I said, it was Carter G. Woodson who when he did his studies, he noticed that he didn't see a whole lot of African American history in the books, and so he decided that he wanted to devote a period of time to studying and focusing on Black history. And so what he did is he chose the second week in February because Abraham Lincoln's birthday and Frederick Douglass's birthday.
Okay.
So it wasn't that he was looking to expand into the shortest week of the month of the year, but that particular photograph there is during the American Revolution. And this is why I tell people it's important to understand the connections. Most people don't realize why the North was free and the South was enslaved, because all 13 colonies actually had started out being slave colonies. But it's because of the contributions of Negroes in the American Revolution to the success of it that the Northerners began to free them right after the Revolution. They thought it was the right thing to do, not only to free the 5,000 or so that fought, but to free their families as well. And so that's what started the Northern colonies with the freedom. And then, of course, that led eventually to the Civil War.
My goodness, it's so, the history is so rich, and obviously there are times that overall we may not be proud of, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
And in order for us to move forward, you've heard the statement before, it's very difficult to know where you're going if you don't know where you've been. And that's what history is. So bring us now to present day. There are people, white, Black, just all types of people who don't necessarily believe that the relevance or the significance of Black History Month is needed as much in today's society. What are your thoughts on that?
My general thought is it's needed more. But that I believe we should still have the time to focus on Black history, because for people that don't focus on it at all, at least that brings them to doing it that short period of time for that month. But really, the goal is to try to implement Black history into the overall story. Because you really don't understand the story of American history if you don't incorporate Black history into it. It's not there yet, and until it's there, then we have to kind of still study it separate from American history. What I've noticed in my research and a number of black history books, they're very good books. They list black historical achievements and events, but they don't plug them into the larger story. So, because I've seen where African Americans fought in the American Revolution, but then when you put them into certain battles and put them into certain things, you actually see how they affected the outcome.
Right.
And so, you know, to a large degree, there may not have been a United States of America had it not been for the African American contributions. And the United States of America could also, Civil War, the Confederates were actually winning at the beginning of the war. And it was after the influx, after 1863, of African American troops that the tide turned. It turned so much so that the Confederates in 1865, just before the end of the war, decided that they had to use them as well.
Wow.
But it was a little too late. But they've actually influenced history and not gotten the credit. So we see a little with the Tuskegee Airmen, but that's like one story, and there are so many others that haven't been told. But you see how things are influenced by their contributions.
And the thing about it, especially the more I listen to you talk about history and the more you bring out those kinds of stories, it doesn't take away from one group or the other. It just is what it is. And you know, either way, if the whites were not a part, then I'm sure things would be a different outcome. If the blacks were not a part, it would be a different outcome. The fact of the matter is, when we work together, when we utilize each other's strengths, when we come together, then everybody benefits. Now, there are those, and I really want to know your thought on this, especially in that you grew up during the civil rights period and you have such background with history. There are blacks I've heard who say blacks were better off. We were better off during segregation.
Right.
With you having the historical background you have, what would be your thought on that?
Overall, no.
Okay.
But I do understand the argument. When the schools were segregated, African American teachers, a lot of older teachers, they had a stake in the children doing well because you're going to help to uplift an entire people. And so they are almost like extensions of your parents. If you did something wrong, the teacher could discipline you and things of that nature. When segregation took place, because it was actually a forced integration, you had white parents that didn't want black teachers disciplining their children. And then you had some black parents that might think that if a white person was disciplining their child, they may overdo something because of a racial feeling. So they took discipline out of schools altogether, basically. And so there was a, you know, of course, we're still reaping the, you know, the fruit of that particular decision. But, you know, there was the overall caring that went along where there was almost a motherly relationship with a child and a teacher then. And it's a little more, you still have a few teachers, good teachers that still have that, but it kind of changed the dynamic. And so like I said, there are some good things and some bad things, but overall the access had to be opened up to equal access. Because when you have two systems, it's easy to shortchange one. You can say, okay, we have all black schools and all white schools. It's easy for us to put the better things in one school and the inferior things in another. When they're all in the same school, they have access to the same things.
When I hear the stories you share about how blacks and whites came together, other ethnicities came together to create the country we now enjoy today, I think to modern day society, and particularly over the past, I'd say 4 years or so, I hear individuals using the terminology, take our country back.
Right.
And when I listen to how this country was built basically with all of us coming together, I'm not quite sure what that really means. Do you have a sense of what individuals are meaning when they say take our country back as it relates to our discussion today, Black history, history in itself?
It's code.
Okay.
it's not Republican or Democratic. It's an African-American president.
Okay.
You know, when Barack Obama was running for president, a few years ago, most African-Americans of my age, older, never thought we would see the day when there would be an African. We wanted it, but we never thought we'd live to see it.
Okay.
The youth who turned out, they actually could envision, well, why not? And I'm talking white and black. Why not? Because they didn't live through the civil rights era and the segregated era. They were born in a place where they were always had access to each other's facilities. So that, the possibility was there for them. We never thought we'd see it, and so but this backlash of we want to take our country back. When Bill Clinton won, he was a Democrat. You never heard that. When Jimmy Carter won, he was a Democrat. You never heard that. When Ronald Reagan, George Bush, no matter what, you never heard we want our country back until Barack Obama, because the thought that you're not supposed to ever be able to achieve this particular office. There's actually, I've got a book that will be coming out soon. It's on Hamburg Massacre. There's a quote by a gentleman from this area, Hammond, he used to be a governor of South Carolina, who was making the argument, this is 1835, making the argument about why they were against emancipating slaves. He said, are you willing to what's going to happen next? They'll be sitting in these halls with us in Congress. And he said that perhaps one that's been born with genius and ambition might even grasp the presidential wreath. So he's saying, are y'all willing to take what's going to come after emancipating them? See, we've told them they were inferior. We know better. But we told them that, but if we free them and allow them to achieve on their own, where will it end?
Right.
And so he actually talked about the possibility of an African-American president in the 1830s. And so that's what they actually were saying. We don't even want to chance something like that happening. Yes. So we have to keep them enslaved.
Well, and I know that this may be a discussion or a topic that's uncomfortable for people, and I understand that. But if we aren't willing to get educated on history, to understand the value that we all have in this world, if we aren't willing to deal with some of our truths that may be ugly and have a conversation that's healthy, that's productive, that's sincere, then we will never move forward. We will never move away from thoughts of racism, from prejudices, whether it's white, black, Hispanic, Asian, because there's always going to be someone different from you. And if we aren't willing to move away from that, to look at, as you stated earlier, that we are more alike than different, then we're going to continue to be in the pits of these evils that continue to keep us down. We're going to continue more with that discussion. Be thinking on those things, all right? Because I believe as a people, we can certainly do a lot better. We'll be right back.
Tired of hearing automated answering services when you have questions about auto, home, renters, motorcycle, or life insurance? Call the Bryant Insurance Agency, where you will always receive a representative ready to answer your questions and provide friendly customer service just for you. Call today for a quick quote at 803-642-8505 or visit us at 909 Daughtery Road in Aiken. Takia and her staff are ready to serve you.
When it comes to grilling, I'm the man. Using Don Seasoning Delight, I'm the grill master.
My seasoning is available at Kroger, Bilo, Food Line, Reeds, and Harvest. Look for it on display in the meat department. Also visit seasoningdelight.com for information and recipes. Don's Seasoning Delight. It's so good.
Don's Seasoning Delight is so good.
The Will Gray Opportunity School has been serving the beautiful Midlands of South Carolina since 1921. Our mission has evolved over the years, and we now specialize in helping young people move past their obstacles in order to achieve success. We give students opportunities to lead, to develop social skills, to become active in their communities, and to taste success. Don't settle for less than the absolute best for your life. Contact us today to take the next step in your journey toward success.
Total Women's Healthcare means treating the women physically, emotionally, and everything in between. At Magnolia Medical Women's Center, we treat and diagnose common and unusual medical problems related to female health. Magnolia Medical Center is a premium high-level obstetrics and gynecology clinic for women of all ages. Our clients receive the time they deserve without feeling rushed and unimportant. We are located in the Aiken Medical Center, 410 University Parkway in Aiken, Suite 2300. Call us today at 803-649-6366.
Hi there, this is Dr. Margot Muniz, and we're here today for Magnolia Medical's Women's Health Tip. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about abnormal uterine bleeding. Abnormal uterine bleeding is quite common, and I would assume that it occurs pretty much to all of us at some point in time in our life. We've all had that embarrassing accident, where you have your friend sneak up behind you and kind of walk behind you out of the church. A lady who's having a continuous problem with heavy menstrual bleeding, irregular bleeding, who is bleeding more than 2 times a month, or is changing their pad and or tampon every hour to 2 hours, is bleeding too much. And this is a very common problem and can be caused by multiple things. A lot of ladies just assume it's them, it's normal, it's been like that their whole life. It is entirely easy to evaluate and treatable. A lot of ladies are afraid to get it assessed because they're afraid that it's going to result in a hysterectomy. We have a myriad of very easy, minimally invasive treatments available to control heavy menstrual bleeding and return you back to normal life activities without having to worry about little accidents and allow you to wear white just like in the commercials. So you have a pleasant day, and we'll talk to you next week. This is Dr. Muniz. Thank you.
Black on black crime. Well, there's white on it. Oh. Welcome back. This is live TV. Welcome back inside of the broadcast. Truly, I have enjoyed this very thought-provoking discussion, and it is our intent here to focus on the education of it all. I believe that ignorance is one of those detrimental components of life that we really want to get rid of. Particularly if we have access to information, if we have the opportunity to gain knowledge, then we should grasp at it, okay? Because again, it only helps us to be progressive. It only helps us to be better. Again, if you have a comment regarding today's discussion, or if you would like to ask a question, feel free to text me on 803-507-6793. And I know I don't have the words text there, and I've been getting calls, but we will have to do text because we don't have the phone mic'd up today, okay? All right, I have a couple of other questions as we somewhat wrap up today's discussion.
Okay.
Reparations. When you look at the photo you've shared with us earlier, the photo of the slave ship, and we understand how the Africans were packed and the conditions with which they endured, unthinkable, unbearable. I don't know if my body could have withstood that, okay? And you then look at the family that was torn apart. Right. The husband sold off and gone in a different direction from his family, etc. Do you believe in reparations?
Reparations is biblical.
Okay.
It's something that generally nations have done when there's a wrong and it's been acknowledged, which is why you see a lot of, in the United States, you see them not wanting to nationally apologize for slavery, because once you admit the wrong, then, okay, how wrong?
Make it right.
Yeah, how wrong was it? And so the question, the actual answer is reparations are due.
Okay.
Whether that will happen or not, I don't know.
Okay.
But you have to still go forward whether it happens or not. And the reason I say that is because it's a payment to the wrong. How do we fix this? Because after the emancipation of the slaves, and you remember, at first there was supposed to be 40 acres and a mule. And they actually started to give it out. That's where a lot of Sea Island people around Charleston got their land. But within a year, they changed it and said, well, we'll just give it to any settler. And so Europeans decided to settle the West and basically settle on land and get free land. The problem was the amount of damage that had been done to African Americans. They were pretty much out on their own with no money, no land, no homes, and told to catch up with us who have benefited from your labor for the last 250 years. And so we have educations and you don't. We have homes and land, so you have to actually come to us to work. And then we get to say, well, maybe we want to pay you 10 cents. And what they would also do is when African Americans decided they wanted to go west and settle on some of this land, they would arrest them for being squatters because it takes time to get west. They'd have to spend the night in fields. They would arrest them, put them in jail, and then hire them out to the plantation owners as their sentence and put them right back on the plantation. So there was a whole number of things. Like I said, reparations is due because it's almost impossible to really make up the kind of ground that you have to make up with 300 or 400 years head start, and you're starting from scratch. What you had, I have another photo here, but I have a couple of my slave ancestors.
Yes.
This is Lawrence and Molly O'Brien, and this is Charlie Broadwater.
Keep holding those up.
Well, Charlie Broadwater was actually, his father was the slave master.
And this is
Alexander
Charlie
Sharpton, yes.
Okay.
Reverend Al Sharpton's family was on the same plantation. I call it the tale of two brothers. He had a brother named David Sharpton who was white, and he was black. And David was able to go to all the best schools, and Charlie couldn't get educated because he was a slave. And David lived in the bakehouse, and Charlie lived in the slave cabin in the back. And so when emancipation came, David had this head start. Even though they're brothers from the same father, David had this head start. He was able to leave land and money to his children and give his children a start. Charlie started with nothing, and by the time he died, he basically had to come up with money to bury him, but he had nothing to leave them for their start. And so they started from scratch. And so you had 5, 6, 7 generations that just made it by and never was able to give their children anything but wits, and faith. And said that this is going to have to take care of you because I really have nothing to leave you. But you have another side that has all these advantages that they start their children out with. And then they wondered why it seems like you're more intelligent because laws have actually been made that help benefit you, and laws have been actually made that suppress the other group. And if you actually made the laws that said it was against the law for Europeans to get an education, but it was lawful for African Americans to get it, then you would see the difference.
Do you believe that all of these ideals trickle into today's society as it relates to the self-esteem that blacks have about ourselves?
It does. I was fortunate. The same group of people. My mother was first black instructor at the Citadel. And both my grandmother was the educator. My grandfather was a principal as well. That great-grandmother that raised me, she would tell me every morning before I went to school that there's nobody on the planet any better than you are. And the reason she told me that is because when you're around your family, they can protect you. When you go off to school, now you're about to go into a bigger world. And so there are going to be some people that look at you as if you're inferior to them, and I want you to understand that you're inferior to no one. So because I believed her.
Yes.
So I said, okay, yes, ma'am. And I would say this all the time and walk out the door. And my mother overheard this one day. And she caught me and said, but you're no better than anyone else either.
That's right.
And what they were doing is they wanted me to have healthy self-esteem, but they also wanted me to be humble because my school was across the street from the projects. And so I was going to meet a lot of people in school that had a lot less than what I had.
Yes.
So they didn't want to raise my self-esteem so high that I looked down on people that had less, because really they didn't have less because of anything they did or anything I did.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this was the circumstance we were born into.
And that's what you call wisdom.
Right, and so even in a white supremacy type of a mindset that you might go into, they don't have those advantages because it's necessarily something they did. You know, circumstances that they were born into, and the United States has set up a system that benefited them. And so that system was helping to undergird what they were doing. So when they gave me those understandings, I understood that you know, things can, you know, change one way or another depending on your circumstances. But you could rise above all of it if you have good self-esteem.
Mr. O'Brien, you've certainly opened our eyes and to a world that maybe needed to be opened up. And we thank you for the discussion today. Last question for you. Why do you do what you do? Why do you tell these stories? Why do you conduct tours? Why do you try to tell the stories of the past that may not always be so pleasant?
Like I said, I believe I was born for this. God called me to do it. I had a business that he told me to leave and go and do what you were born to do. And he took me back over my childhood and showed me how I was trained in an environment and with a group of people that was actually preparing me to do this. I owe it to God first. I owe it to my family. I owe it to those people that suffered. But I also owe it to humanity, because humanity was actually created to be better than it is. And the ideal of America in terms of freedom, all men are created equal, America needs to live up to that particular ideal. It's a great ideal, but in practice, it hasn't necessarily been practiced. And so you're really holding everybody up to be what they're called to be. So it's not, George Washington is not less a great general or less a great president because the African Americans took part in the American Revolution.
That's right.
You know, you give him credit for what he did, but don't neglect credit for the people that did other things. So instead of suppressing them, bring their stories out, let everybody's story be told. And if you're a great man, regardless of whatever your color is, you're a great man.
Yes, amen to that. And one thing I do know, God didn't make junk. As my grandmother used to say, God ain't make no junk. So it doesn't matter who you are, whether you're short, tall, heavy or thin, white, black, wealthy or not, you are somebody special. And I believe as we talk about Black History Month and we celebrate it during the month of February, that we also look at celebration of all history throughout the year. We're all special and we all have a part to play. So we thank you for joining us today. Join me on Facebook. I've written an editorial called Racism Paralyzes the Hope of Unity. Check it out. Thank you, Mr. O'Brien, for being with us today. You all have a great day and tune in with us next week. My name is Donna Moore Westby, your host of Education Matters, where we're connecting you to the world of education one step at a time. Have a great day.
If you are interested in becoming an individual or corporate sponsor of Education Matters or to receive sponsorship information, call Donna Moore Westby at 803-507-6793 or send an email to dwesby@edmat.com.